All right. So Rob and his team at School Perceptions helped develop the survey and delivered it. And tonight is the night we could find out what the results are. So, Rob, we're ready for you whenever you're ready.
All right. So, are you looking at something that looks like it has your name on it?
Correct.
Okay. Good start. All right. So let's get rolling. First, let me say how much I appreciate, though, allowing me to present virtually. This is our busy time of year, and we're doing a lot of meetings like we are tonight with you. I got to head down to Pecatonica. I got to head up to Cameron, and then somewhere fourth on the list that honestly I don't even remember off the top of my head. So point is, I can't speed that much. So I appreciate your flexibility in allowing me to present virtually. As we go through tonight's presentation, you're going to see some color codes here, just like you see up on your screen. So anytime you see a blue slide, we will go through those a little bit more quickly because there's not going to be anything new on the blue slides. Your blue slides are copy pastes or they're screenshots of the materials that were exactly in your survey so that you don't have to dig up an old copy or find something that's long been recycled off your counter, or if you have a copy, whether you're wondering whether it's the final version. Our goal is to make these reports a one-stop shop for you so that you don't have to dig anything else up. In terms of the yellowish color, that's going to be some survey and respondent information. Anything in green are where we'll spend our most time tonight. Those are your results and analysis. And then finally, at the end, I will certainly leave time for you to ask us any questions that you need. So who are we? Who am I? So again, like John said, my name is Rob Demise. I serve as the research director at School Perceptions. School Perceptions, actually, we just had our 20th birthday, so now we're in our 21st year. And in those 21 years, our mission has never once changed. It's to help educational leaders such as yourselves do three things: gather, organize, and use data to make strategic decisions. In those now 21 years, we've conducted well over 10,000 staff, parent, student, and community surveys, all in the name of school improvement. And we've helped more than 900 districts, including you a couple of years back, navigate the strategic planning and referendum planning processes. Just a reminder of the process. So in terms of how your survey got out, households within the district were mailed a paper survey. And then at that point, I had a couple of options as a respondent. I could fill out the paper survey and use the envelope to return it directly back to us at School Perceptions. Or I had the opportunity to take the survey online with a one-time use code. Heavy emphasis on one-time use. As you may have seen if you took it online, once you hit submit or finish, that goes away so that I can't take the survey dozens and dozens of times and skew the data in a way that I want to see it be skewed. But regardless, the data comes back to us at School Perceptions. Actually, I don't even know who gets what codes. John doesn't know. Obviously, none of you know who gets what code because all of that is in the name of confidentiality so that you don't know what anyone says. You just get the overall data. Your survey took place in October and November of 2022, as I'm sure you remember, for 422 total respondents, for a response rate that was almost exactly on target, an average of what we've seen over the past couple of years. About 17.5% or so is what we've seen over the last year or two. You're at 18%. And that's worked out quite well. In fact, I just ran the numbers today on our November elections, so the surveys that we had out this past spring. And we were right around 92% accuracy. I want to say it was about 38 out of 42 questions on the ballot we had right. So with that average response rate, we're right definitely more often than not. And I think our 5-year average is right around 94% accuracy. The other benefit is the more total respondents you have, the tighter your margin of error gets as well for your bottom bullet point. One demographic question we asked was age. So here you're going to see a little bit of a bell curve that breaks up top at 65 plus. So there's a couple of things I look for right off the bat. Your 35 to 54, the two bars in the middle, are typically a little overrepresented vis-a-vis your community in general. And that's not surprising to me because there's a lot of staff and there's a lot of people of parenting age in those two age groups. And I always tell folks that if staff and parents aren't going to be taking a school survey, nobody takes a school survey. So it's not bad to be overrepresented in those areas because it's kind of a first hurdle to cross. The other place my eye goes is your 65 plus. And you're a little overrepresented here. 14.2% of your community is 65 plus. 17%, as you see in the screen in the upper part, 17% of your survey respondents were 65 plus. Now, the reason that's good is because your 65 plus have near perfect attendance at elections. They will be there. They will let you know what they think. and they're the most likely to be in a fixed income and most likely to be most disconnected from the school. So we have to know what they think, and in this case, we are, to the tune of about 3% overrepresentation. We then asked, is your primary residence in the school district? Now, the reason we ask this, and you may very well be asking yourself a question that's a good question, why does school perception send this to people who don't live here? The answer to that, there's really 3 legs to that stool. The first leg would be your staff, who obviously have no requirement to live within the district's boundaries, but they do have an email address. Any parent who chooses to enroll their kiddos into the district, by definition, doesn't live there, or they wouldn't need to open enroll in. And then if I would have a second property, or if I own land and I happen to have a mailbox, but I don't necessarily live there, I may still get the survey. The point is, though, we're going to strip out the 10% of people who can't vote there, not because they may not be influential, they may very well be influential, but their influence is capped because they can't vote there. So on many of the disaggregations moving forward, we're going to focus on the 90% who can. I did run this slide by John just to make sure we were on the same page, and it sounds like this is pretty much what you would expect. The question is, in which municipality do you live? The village of Spring Valley looks like it's split up in Pierce County and St. Croix County, but your Pierce County village was definitely the largest bulk of your survey respondents, followed by Gilman and Katy. We then asked 2 questions that we purposely put together on the same slide. We asked, are you an employee of the district, and do you have children attending a school in the district? What I look at this slide is I make sure that staff and parents are taking the survey, but I don't want them to be the only people taking the survey, because most people are not employed by you and have kiddos in school. So what I would expect here is pretty much what I expect to see. Parents are obviously very motivated to take a school survey, like I mentioned before. But regardless of how this data looks, we're going to go through quite a bit of data on the upcoming slides that break things up into staff, parents, and non-parents, non-staff. So on many slides moving forward, you're going to get 3 pieces of data. Finally, then, we did ask, if you have school-age children, what schools do they attend? This doesn't add up to 100%, nor should it, because this was a mark all that apply, and I very well could have a kiddo in elementary, middle, and high school. So I would mark all 3 in this case. But if you did want to slice and dice this data and say, do middle school parents feel differently than elementary school parents, or vice versa, or how do high school parents feel, you could certainly do that. You can disaggregate on any of the questions that we've asked in our survey. Finally, then, a question that was a little bit different. Note how this question reads. It says, how do you like to receive school and district information? Not how do you? Because in theory, if I'm a general community member, you could be communicating with me in a way that I don't want to be communicated with. I want to be communicated with in a different way. So this is a preference question. How do I want to be communicated with? And for your non-parents, non-staff, they are in purple. For the most part, they want to get their news from school and district newsletters, and to a little bit of a lesser extent, the website and the Sun Argus. For your parents, they're a bit more balanced, but their eyeballs really want to go to emails, the website, and newsletters. Now, as and when you move forward with any projects, whether it's a year from now or 5 years from now, most of the time you're going to use almost all of these things anyhow, but I always tell folks that it's kind of nice to know you're bang for your buck. If we send something out there into the ether, is it going into a place where people want to read it or not? Next up then were the results and analysis. So we're into some green slides here, and this section of your survey was called Your Feedback. So we noted that in October of 2021, this group, the Board of Education, adopted several goals, and you wanted to measure some of the progress on those goals. The most important thing out of this slide, though, is bear in mind the scale that you see down here in the lower left. So every metric, the higher you get, the better. In an ideal world, which by the way never exists for any district, but in an ideal world, you'd see 4s all the way down the map. The range here is 1 to 4, though. You can't be doing worse than a 1, and you can't be doing better than a 4. If you see 1, that means you're doing poorly in an area. If you see something approaching a 4, it means you're doing great in an area. So just bear that in mind as we go through these slides. Can't be worse than a 1, can't be better than a 4, but the higher the better. Now, what we did here, and this is going to take some time to go through, and so I obviously recognize that I'm not on stage for 2 hours, though I could take up some time. This is really data that you're going to need to digest. It could be well over the next week, 2 weeks, next couple of months, because there's a lot of data on these next couple of slides. But the presentation of the data doesn't change. So for instance, we asked, how are we doing in each of the following areas? And then there were some subheadings in this section. So for instance, preparing students for apprenticeships, tech school, or colleges. You're going to see a score here based on the weights that I just had. So again, 1 to 4, and you're going to see 3 numbers for each particular item. You're going to see a number for staff, you're going to see a number for parents, and you're going to see a number for non-parents, non-staff. So this is really where it takes some time. You're going to want to go down the slides and say, okay, how are staff feeling? And then you're also going to go across. You know, are there pretty much agreement among the groups in terms of how we're doing, or are they disagreeing a little bit? Where I want to take you, though, I'm going to jump a few slides ahead and really kind of package this data in a way that I feel is a little bit easier to understand and a little bit easier to digest. It was the same question, and it was the same section of the survey, but what I did is I said, okay, looking strictly at staff, what are the 5 areas that they gave you the highest score? And I did them 1 to 5 here. So the highest possible score, employing high quality teachers and staff, that's what your staff said. The 5th highest score for them was having high expectations for students. And then I did the same exercise for parents who are not one of your employees. What floated to the top for them? Where did they give you your highest marks? And then for non-parents, non-staff, what are the 5 highest items that they gave to you? And then I said, well, is there any agreement among these groups? And fortunately, there is. Something that floated to the top for all 3 groups, or in other words, areas where all 3 groups are saying you're really doing a good job, are the ones that you're seeing here in green. Employing high quality teachers and staff, keeping up-to-date classrooms to support student learning, creating a safe and secure campus, and maintaining the support of the community. Those were in the top 5 for all 3 groups. I then did the same exercise, but I flipped the data and I said, okay, so where are we getting our bottom scores for each? Where is each subgroup ranking us the lowest? Did the same exercise, but here what I did then is I looked across and I labeled them in red if there's agreement among where each group says we need to improve. And that's really where you would use this data. Obviously, there are finite number of hours, there's finite amount of dollars you have, your resources are limited. So, you know, in terms of the green, this might be where you spend a little bit less of your resources coming up because these are already things that seem to be going pretty well. But if there are areas where you're for certain going to want to sharpen your pencils and say, okay, how can we fix these things in the future? Some of these things in red are maybe where you would start because there's agreement among all 3 groups that they need to improve here. And what would those be? That would be preparing students for jobs in our area, whether it be agricultural, trades, or so on, and partnering with the village to offer community and youth recreation. There was then a section called overall satisfaction. So kind of in a nutshell, when push comes to shove, how are we doing? This too, I put in here just for good measure, but it's the same scale. Can't be better than a 4, can't be worse than a 1. And this slide too has a lot of data on it, but I did want to follow the same pattern here. The question read, how well are we doing in the following areas? Those areas being 4, delivering a high quality education, keeping the public informed, managing funds appropriately, and building pride in the community. This broke it up by our now familiar 3 groups, staff, parents, and non-parents, non-staff. But to summarize the data a little bit, I pooled the data together, and this slide, while asking the same question, offers a slightly different picture. So as I look across the rows here, building pride in the community, the percentage of people that took your survey who said you were doing a great or good job in this metric was 86%. So nearly 9 in 10 said you're doing great or good at building pride in the community. That's outstanding. And you're above good, actually, and you're approaching great in terms of that overall average. You're between 3 and a 4 on that particular metric. And then we get over to your comparison percentile. So just a reminder of what this is. A comparison percentile tells you what percentage of districts you are doing better than. So in this particular case, if you're at the 79th percentile, it means you're doing better than 79% of other districts on this particular metric. And that's where you want to be. You want to be on the greater side of 50. The highest possible score you could get would be the 99th percentile, because in that case, it would mean that you're doing better than everybody else. The worst possible score you could get would be the 1st percentile, because that would mean that everybody else is doing better than you. So same pattern here, the higher the better, and it tells you how many districts you're doing better than. And just going down these rows here, you're above the median on all of them. You're exactly where you want to be. In fact, your lowest score here, and I say that with heavy air quotes, you're still doing better than 62% of other districts out there. And even in your lowest metric, you're still between good and great. And you actually garnered the highest percentage of great or good on any of the metrics in terms of delivering a high quality education. So really the way to read this slide is that you really got to take it 1 row and 1 column at a time. just a very quick lesson on that. I remember towards the end of my graduate school career, I had to sit for some sort of computerized exam. I don't know what it was, but it was the kind of exam where you hit submit and then it gave you your score right away. And I got something like a 93 or 94%. And, I walked out with my chest puffed and strutted out, felt real good about myself, got a 93 or 94%. And then I got a letter in the mail that said most other people got like a 97 or 98% on that particular exam. What do I do? Well, my chest deflated a little bit, but I still did really good. So I had to balance that where I passed with flying colors. I just did a little bit worse than everybody else who did really, really well. And that's kind of what you're seeing down here at the bottom. I mean, your scores are absolutely outstanding down here. Frankly, you're never going to get to 100%. The fact that you're at 88%, who are saying you're in great or good, is a pretty darn good place to be. Then we said on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend the district to a friend or family member? A couple things I look at here. It's on a scale of 0 to 10, and your overall average was 7.74, whereas your comparison average is 7.13. That means that just like we had in the last slide, we have our percentile. Your score went up here relative to a few of the last metrics. You're doing better than 83% of other districts on this particular metric. The other thing that I do here is just out of my own curiosity, I just do some arithmetic and I start at the top and work down towards the bottom. And I say, well, how far do I need to go before I reach a majority? And it isn't that far. So if I take 25%, 1/4 of respondents gave me the highest possible score that they could. 25 and 19 is 44, plus another 21. I'm at 65%. So I'm right around 2/3 of your survey respondents, and I only got down to 8. And frankly, over the past year, that really isn't common. There were times where I wouldn't reach a majority until I was about 4 or 3, sometimes even 2. And that wasn't fun data to present. And unfortunately, that's not you here. You're rocking this percentile. Then we went into a section called advice. And it said, John, our superintendent, is entering his second year. As he settles in, what advice do you have for him as he leads the school district in order to do this successfully? And people could choose up to 4. And you're going to see something that I did before come up again here. So there were enough items that I wanted to spread it across 3 different slides. Here too, I'm not going to spend a ton of time in each row. Frankly, that would just be kind of boring and it's way too much data to digest at one time. So instead, what I want to do is I want to tell you how I read this data. And then as you're digesting it over the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to put the puzzle pieces together. So for instance, what I do is I say, okay, are there some areas where the bars are all a little bit longer? And are there areas where the bars are all kind of uniformly shorter? So for instance, it's pretty even here. And these bars are pretty long in terms of all 3 groups, wanting John to be transparent about the district's data and decision-making processes. So I would look at that, and if I were in John's shoes, I would say, okay, certainly that's something that I want to make sure I do as I sit in this chair. Down towards the bottom, though, for instance, improving the district's brand and reputation, very few people believe that John needed to do that. So first I look and see where are the bars kind of uniformly long, where are they uniformly short, and then I say, well, are there some bars that kind of, extend a little bit more than some others? So for instance, on this particular slide, your parents, more so than your staff and your non-parents, non-staff, are recommending that we should implement new and innovative ways to educate our students. So again, just in summary, where are the bars fairly long? Where are they fairly short? And then are there some items where there seems to be some disagreement, where one bar is longer than the other 2? However, I put the data together just like I did before. And I said, okay, what are the top 5 pieces of advice that staff have for John? What are the top 5 pieces of advice for parents that parents have for John? And what are the top 5 pieces of advice that non-parents, non-staff have for John? And as I was talking through this data with him the other day, I said, I don't know if it's good or bad, but everybody's giving you the same pieces of advice. So take that as you will. But all 5 groups want John to focus on the same things. So engaging with staff to make sure that they're building consensus and being heard, being transparent about data and decision-making processes, being willing to listen to various opinions, take a position, and own a final decision, being friendly, accessible, and approachable, and making decisions with a whole student or student-first mindset. Meaning, it's not just academics, it's also how they're doing from a mental health perspective. Do they have opportunities to be involved at school, and so on. So everybody had the same advice for John, pretty much. In terms of where there was less advice, there were still some overlaps, and that was committing to engaging all races, socioeconomic groups, and genders, and improving the district's brand and reputation. Now, one thing I will say here is, and I would tell this no matter who's sitting in this room, The wrong way to use this data is as an evaluation, because this question did not say, are we doing badly or are we doing quite well? Because, for instance, if you're doing a great job at maintaining a brand and reputation, then I may not necessarily tell you to put a bunch of resources and time in there because you're already doing well at it. So even though the advice flows towards the bottom, it doesn't mean you're doing badly. It just means this is not an area where we want you to focus. And flip side here, if I'm telling you to focus on an area, it's not saying you're doing bad or well, because you could be doing really well, and I want you to continue that. So note that the wrong way to use this data is as an evaluation, because that's simply not what it can tell you. Finally, then, in terms of facilities, we're back to some blue slides. So as a reminder, we talked a little bit about the strategic planning that you had done, some of the primary challenges that popped up based on your strategic plan. And from an educational perspective, noted that these are too costly to be paid for from the annual budget, and therefore you would need to pursue a capital or facilities referendum. We then explained each phase. So phase 1, what that would include, phase 2, what that particular work would include, and phase 3 for a total cost and what that would include. We noted what that impact would be, and in fact here, we noted that voter approval of all 3 phases would maintain the 22-23 tax mill rate and remain below the level that you had in 21-22. And then we asked the question, and it read verbatim, what, if any, athletic and co-curricular projects would you support through a capital referendum at this time? And we're still focusing on that 90% of people who can vote there. These are residents. So a couple of ways to approach this. First, notice that the bars that were the highest, the respond or the option that gained either the majority of or a plurality of choices were phases 1, 2, and 3. However, note that that is very unlikely to get you to 50% of your electorate. Why do I say that? Well, for instance, if I look at this purple bar, non-parents, non-staff, most people in your community are non-parents, non-staff, like you heard me say earlier. About 75% of any given community are in this purple bar right here, or in these purple bars rather. So that's the first place my eyes always go, because it's the biggest chunk of people. So if, for instance, you were to take phases 1, 2, and 3 to ballot, you would only get 31% support from the largest group of your community. In other words, that ain't gonna fly. So the question is then, what phases do we do if we want to reach a majority of our voters? That's what this next slide is telling you here. So it's the same question, it's the same group of people, the data is simply represented in a slightly different way. So I'm going to begin in the upper left because this is non-parents, non-staff. It's always where I begin because the most people are here. Same number, 31%, just like I had up on the previous slide. And phases 1, 2, and 3 is the most expensive. So that's not gonna fly. So then when I said, well, what if we lower the price and we do phases 1 and 2? Well, that gets you up to 40%. You don't cross the majority threshold for your non-parents, non-staff until you go down to a cost or a total estimate of phase 1. This does stand out a little bit here. The 35% of your non-parents, non-staff who are saying no right out of the gate, that is fairly high. It's over 1/3, as you can see. And I would say on any given project, this number is right around 1/4. There's always going to be a group of people that say no, but you are a little bit higher than average here. I'm not shocked by that since this was an athletics-focused area, and athletics always tests more poorly than what you're in the business of, so to speak, which is your classrooms and your labs and the infrastructure that you need to keep your lights on and your water running. So non-parents, non-staff, they'll support you at phase 1. For your parents, they are a bit more supportive. They're about 25% of any given community. They'll support you at phases 1 and 2, and your staff support you at phases 1, 2, and 3. So again, the question is, well, okay, that's all great, Rob, but what do we do if we want to move forward? What do you recommend we would take to a ballot? When I weight the support based on how big the groups are in the community, this is what I see. So in other words, what I did is for your non-parents, non-staff, they're about 75% of your community, so it's 0.75 at 31% support. Parents at about 25% of your community at 47% support for phases 1, 2, and 3. If you took phases 1, 2, and 3 to ballot, we would expect approximately 35% of your community to support that referendum, well below the 50% plus one that is passage. So then I said, well, what if you did phases 1 and 2? The support goes up a little bit because the cost went down, the total cost went down, and you're right around 46%, still below 50% plus one. You cross majority threshold when phase 1 is asked of taxpayers and your community. That's where you cross at 58.3. So that's how these pieces fit together. Phase 1 is where you cross 50%. So in summary, I recognize that's a lot of data. What did we learn? The district scored above the median or above the 50th percentile on all 5 satisfaction metrics. 2, there is strong overlap among subgroups when measuring feedback on the district's performance and advice for the superintendent. And third, based on the additional analysis, in other words, this slide right here, the district could consider placing the phase 1 project on the ballot in April. Let me pause there and see what questions or comments you have for me.
Are you going to publish this? Do you put the report available?
Yeah, I'm sure we can. We're also recording this video to put on our website too, Paul. So along with Rob's descriptions. You're a print guy. Yes, you are. Yeah, we'll get these results shared. So they make a lot more.
Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, they make a lot more sense with Rob's kind of description, but they speak for themselves too.
You obviously have done a lot of.
SIFT, yes.
Thank you.
No questions so far, Rob.
Okay. Well, I will say, for better or worse, John knows how to find me. So if you do have questions as you're noodling on this, by all means, it always is inevitable. As soon as I hang up, you'll think of something. So please, if you need anything, by all means, pass those along to John. John and I can certainly connect. And if you need any help with the data or what an area means or disaggregations or whatever we can do to help, by all means, keep this in mind.
I appreciate the context that you provide, Stuart. There is so much to learn.
All right. Oh, question?
I guess I got one. Obviously, it looks like one referendum right now for phase 1. 5 years down the road, would phase 2 pass? Do you think, by looking at the data right now? Or obviously it would be another referendum 5, 7, 10 years down the road.
My very unsatisfying answer to that is I truly don't know. Typically, our survey data has a shelf life of about 8 to 9 months. So you were kind of at the sweet spot of you had a survey out about 6 months or so before you went to ballot, which is typically what we want. Anything longer than that, and I just can't say. I just don't know.
So Rob, along with that, how many times do districts not take your advice and go stretch for a little bit more and it's successful? Can you think of examples where that's happened?
The fact that I'm struggling is probably indicative of its own. It's not very often. I mean, we really try to encourage you to listen to the data. And if anything, going for more, especially in an athletics-focused project, is not necessarily going to be your best friend. I think you're pretty safe with phase 1. And typically, if we have any recommendation, it's to go a little lower. And certainly over the last year, I've gotten a little more conservative and much less brave maybe than I were in the past. But we really do encourage you to listen to the data. And even if somebody does inch it up a little bit, it might be because what we tested could be at like 70% support, and so they inch it up by maybe 1 million or 2. And certainly it's not tackling whole other projects because it's simply not what your community is telling you to. That being said, a couple of years down the road, one of two things could happen. Sometimes when phase one goes into place, people get really excited about it, and they see that interesting and cool things are happening for their kids, and it motivates them to vote yes next time around. At the same time, some people can say, we feel like we already gave you enough. Just hold your horses for a bit. We'll let you know when we're ready again. Which is maybe a long answer to a short question, John, but as close as you can, I would say hew to the data. Because if you don't, and then it fails, then you really got to cut back, because then people are mad that you didn't listen, and then you do another survey and they say, I already told you what you thought. I told you no. Why are you asking me again? So it's kind of I don't want to say it's a one-shot deal, but if it doesn't go as planned in April, then you're really going to have to cut back, and you'll have to wait another whole year, because your next chance in Wisconsin will not be until April of 2024.
Thanks, Rob.
Can I shoot another question, Rob?
Well, technically no, Paul, but technically no, but is it a really good question?
Well, I'm just curious what his experience is with promotion of the proposal of any particular phase. So does it make a difference? You've got this data. It looks like you're smart to proceed based on the data. Have you had experience with a district then going ahead and using a community campaign to help ensure success?
The answer is yes. In fact, it's pretty rare that a district gets something passed without there being some sort of face of the project. And whether it's the board in their official capacity or whether it's John in his official capacity, it can't be you, because you cannot be advocates while you're on the clock. That's unlawful. But there are people that are unaffiliated with the school that could certainly have a vote yes campaign. That being said, we're kind of purposefully ignorant about that world, because we see ourselves as very unbiased representatives of the taxpayers. In fact, we have had vote no groups ask to review the data, and we say yes. We have had vote yes groups say, hey, can you review the data with us? And we say yes, because we are not on the side of seeing something fail. We're not on the side of seeing something pass. So I guess we don't do a lot in that world, because we don't want to be accused of being biased in any way. So I know that there are groups that do that very well, and I know it's very common, and you may have done that for your elementary school, but I would say, based on my experience, it's fairly uncommon to see something get passed without some group waving the flag for the project.
Thank you.
I think we're good.
All right. Rob, on to your next meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night. Take care.
For the help.
Rob,
Thanks, Rob.